Kim Simpkins, and I am the Scholarships Coordinator here at Pitt Community College. I work with the PCC Foundation to award scholarships to students so they can pursue their academic and career goals. The PCC Foundation houses more than 150 scholarships that we award to over 400 students each year, and in the past 10 years we've awarded more than $3 million in scholarships. We want you to be one of the students to receive one of those scholarships. So we hope you find this presentation helpful in knowing the steps to take to apply and some tips in helping you increase your chances of being selected.
You're probably asking the same question as old Ben Franklin here. So how do you get a scholarship anyway? Well, I'm glad you and Ben asked. By the end of this presentation, you should have all your questions answered about applying for scholarships with the PCC Foundation. We're going to discuss the steps to submitting a scholarship application and how to increase your chances of being selected to receive a scholarship. So it might seem obvious to say, but the most important thing to do if you want a scholarship is to apply for them. So many students are missing out on free money for college because they don't take the time and make the effort to apply. This could be because students don't know how to apply, or maybe they feel overwhelmed by the process, or perhaps they believe they're not eligible to receive scholarships. Well, by the end of this presentation, all of these concerns should be eliminated. So let's jump right in. First, I'd like to briefly share with you about the PCC Foundation. We are a 501c3 charitable organization, and we work to secure resources to support the mission of PCC and the success of its students. The PCC Foundation is committed to raising funds for student scholarships and assistance through fundraising events and donor contributions. It is our goal to put as many scholarships in the hands of students as possible. Students often assume they're not eligible for scholarships because they believe either their household income is too high to qualify or that they don't have a pristine academic record such as straight A's. Well, both of these assumptions are wrong. We have many different types of scholarships. Some are merit-based, meaning they're awarded for academic merit, leadership, and community service, things like that. We also have need-based scholarships, which are awarded based on the financial need of the student. And some are a combination of those two things. One thing to note is at the PCC Foundation, all of our scholarships have one main criteria across the board, and that is a GPA requirement of 2.5 or higher. So what I want you to take away from this is, if your GPA is 2.5 or higher, then you should apply for scholarships. Yes, you, all of you. If you would like to see a list of all the scholarships offered by the PCC Foundation, you can find a list using the URL listed here. This list includes a description of the scholarships and many times will also include the eligibility criteria if you're curious about those. One side note I do want to make is I want to make sure to differentiate between PCC Foundation scholarships and scholarships available through our financial aid office. Scholarships funded by federal or state funds are handled by our financial aid office. An example of this would be the Golden Leaf Scholarship. Now, these scholarships will have different application procedures and deadlines. So for more information about those, please contact the PCC's financial aid office. Additionally, for information about the Bulldog Promise Scholarship for Pitt County students who meet dual enrollment eligibility, please contact Brian Jones in Enrollment Services. So now let's take a look at a step-by-step guide on how to apply for scholarships. There are 5 basic steps to apply for scholarships. One of these is optional, and we'll talk about that when we get to that step. Let's take a look at these one at a time, beginning with step 1. Step 1 is to apply for admission to PCC. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about how to apply for admission, but I do want you to know why it's required. The reason you need to do this step first is because you need a student user ID and password to log into our scholarship portal. This is where the scholarship application is housed and where students will be able to view and accept scholarship offers. Students who have already taken classes at PCC will already have their user ID and password, but prospective students, those new to PCC, need to allow enough time for the admissions process to take place. Currently, this is about 7 to 10 days, but it could vary. So please plan ahead and allow for this step. Not having access to a user ID and password or a delay in the admissions process are not acceptable reasons to request a deadline extension. Let's move on to step number 2. Step number 2 is simply to log into the scholarship portal. You can see the URL on the screen here, or you can simply go to PCC's website and search for scholarships, and you should be able to find a link. You'll see the sign in button at the top right part of the screen. You can see it here circled in green. Once you click on sign in, you'll be taken to the login screen. Here is where you will enter that user ID and password we've previously mentioned. One thing to note is to make sure you're signing in on the Applicants and Administrators tab. So notice on this particular slide, at the top of the screen, you'll see 2 different tabs. Make sure you're logging in on the correct one, which is the Applicants and Administrators tab. If you have trouble signing in, note that there is a link at the bottom of the screen to request assistance. Now, once you've clicked on Sign In, you should be taken to the general application if it's currently open for submissions. Moving on to step number 3, and that is to complete and submit the general application. I'm going to be giving you some tips on this a little later. One handy feature to note here is that you can save your work and come back and finish it later by clicking on Save and Keep Editing. This saves your application as a draft. But one important thing to note is if you do save it and come back to it later, you will need to be sure to click on Finish and Submit, which you can see at the bottom of the screen. Any applications left as drafted are not reviewed and are not eligible for scholarships. So don't forget that important step of clicking Finish and Submit. While we're at this step, I just want to briefly talk about the auto match feature of our scholarship system because I think this takes so much of the frustration out of the application process. So when you submit the general application, the system will automatically match you to every single scholarship opportunity that you qualify for. It's like one application becomes several in the click of a button. It's such a time saver for you. So it means you don't have to spend time combing through all 150 plus of our scholarships trying to decide which ones to apply for. It's just a great feature. Let's move on to step number 4. Now, this is the optional step I referred to earlier. We do have some scholarships that require a little more information than the general application asks. These scholarships require you to maybe answer an additional question or upload an essay. So how do you know about these scholarships? When you click on Finish and Submit on the general application, the scholarship system is going to give you a list of recommended opportunities. You can see what that looks like here on the screen. Read the eligibility criteria, and if you're eligible, go ahead and click on the Apply button and complete the additional information that's requested. Now, one great tip for you is that these scholarships usually receive fewer applications because they require an extra step. So if you take the time to apply to these, you'll increase your chances of being selected for a scholarship. Now let's take a look at one example of this. This scholarship requires an essay. So to apply for this one, you would need to type up your essay, save it as the indicated file type. Here it's a PDF. Then you'll upload the document and click on Finish and Submit. Now, scholarships that require essays receive the fewest number of applications. So putting in the extra effort to provide a high-quality essay can really pay off big in the way of scholarships. Let's take a look at step number 5. The final step in the process is to submit the FAFSA for the upcoming academic year. This is required to be eligible for any of our need-based scholarships, which is over half of the scholarships we offer. Remember that FAFSA submissions from previous years are not acceptable, so be sure you have a current FAFSA completed. If you're not sure if you have a current FAFSA on file or if you need help completing the FAFSA, our financial aid office is happy to help you and answer any questions you have. Now that we've looked at the 5 steps to applying for scholarships, let's move on to talking about how applications are scored. I want to talk about how applications are scored because your score has a direct impact on your chances of receiving a scholarship. Now, every scholarship application is read and scored by 2 reviewers. These 2 scores are averaged to compute the final score that's assigned to each application. Here you can see some of the areas that receive scores. Things like academic achievement, community service or volunteerism, the content and quality of the answers you provide, leadership, work ethic, overcoming exceptional circumstances, and perseverance. Let's talk about ways to increase your score in each of these areas. Again, your application score is important because the higher the score, the higher the probability you will be selected for a scholarship. Let's look at some tips on increasing your score. Tip number 1. Now is the time to brag on yourself. Tell us how great you are. We want to hear all about you. Take your time and think through what you'd like to include. You also might want to ask someone else to help you think of things to include on the application. Some things to think about are academic achievements, personal achievements. Maybe you've received a work promotion. Maybe you've been very active as a volunteer in the community. Tell us about obstacles that you've overcome. Include any awards and recognitions that you have received. Include clubs and organizations that you've been an active member in, and tell us about any community contributions that you may have made. Moving on to tip number 2 here is to be thorough. Be as thorough as possible. Points are awarded for things like work ethic and perseverance, but we will only be able to award these points if you tell us enough about yourself that we can make that determination. The more information you give us, the better your score will likely be. So take a look at these 2 examples. The response on the right is much more thorough and contains details such as the amount of time spent at the various activities and specific duties performed. If you don't take the time to be thorough, you're cheating yourself out of potential points, and this will reduce your chances of receiving a scholarship. The answer on the left will likely receive a score of 3 or 4, while the answer on the right will probably score a 7 to 9. Let's move on to another tip. Tip number 3. Grammar and punctuation matter. Take pride in your responses and do your best to use proper grammar and punctuation when you're answering open-ended questions. you do have a score assigned for the quality of your answers. So this is an important step. Poor grammar, punctuation, and capitalization do result in lower scores and will reduce your chances of being selected for a scholarship. And finally, please don't type your answers as you would a text message. That's not appropriate on a scholarship application, a job application, or a college admissions application. An answer like the one you see at the bottom of this screen will only receive 1 point out of 10. So please don't make that mistake. Tip number 4 is to give customized answers. You want to make yourself stand out from the crowd. Think about ways that you are unique and focus on those things. Tell your unique story. You can see examples here of 2 different ways to answer the same question. The first answer is generic and cookie cutter. The second is much better because it tells the story and it's personalized. The first answer will probably be given a score of about 3 to 4 on a scale of 1 to 10, and the second will probably be given a score of about 7 to 8. As you can begin to see, these scores will begin to add up, and 2 or 3 points off on all the areas can make a big difference in your overall score. Moving on to tip number 5, that is to share your passion. This kind of ties into the previous tip about customizing your answers, but scholarship reviewers love to see that you have a passion for what you're studying. Give detailed but authentic answers. Let's look at an example of an excellent answer. Now, without reading this entire response to you, it is important to note that this student gives very specific information about why they are pursuing their career field. This answer will score 10 out of 10. And finally, let's talk about some additional tips. Have someone else proofread your application and provide feedback. Take the time to apply for scholarships that require an essay. We've already talked about that. And finally, don't wait until the last minute to apply, or you will be rushed and your answers will show that. Now, you've turned in a stellar application and you've received a scholarship offer. What now? There are a few things to know after you've received an offer. Award notifications are sent out by the scholarship system to the student's PCC email account, so it's important to check your student email regularly. You will not receive anything in the mail. There is a limited amount of time, typically 2 weeks, to accept or decline the scholarship. If you don't accept it by the deadline, the offer is retracted and is offered to another applicant, so don't let that happen to you. You will accept the scholarship by logging back into the scholarship portal and clicking on the award notification and indicating that you accept the offer. After you've accepted, a short questionnaire will be emailed to you. It's important to go check that because it is required for you to complete this questionnaire. Your scholarship funds will be held until you submit it. And if you don't submit it by the deadline, you do run the risk of losing your scholarship. After we receive your online questionnaire, scholarship funds are deposited directly into your PCC student account and will reduce the amount you owe to the college for your tuition and fees. Now, as we begin to wrap up this presentation, I want to draw your attention to the fact that we have a list of frequently asked questions on the PCC Foundation website. This can help answer a lot of the questions that you might have. You can find this by using the URL listed here or by going to the PCC Foundation website and clicking on the Scholarships tab at the top of the screen. Again, don't forget that the deadline for applications for the 2022-23 academic year is April 1st, 2022. But don't wait until the last minute. Get your application in right away. I hope you found this presentation helpful, but please know that if you still have questions, I am here to help. You can reach me at the email address and phone number listed here on the screen. Now, go. Get started on that application.